So, hi guys, to all you aspiring medical students, and welcome to this live Q&A. It's one of the webinars run by the Becoming a Doctor Aspiring Medical Students team this year. Normally we'd do these sort of events live, but obviously with the current situation, they're all online. So these are a series of Q&As to help you guys with your applications. We're here to answer any sort of questions you've got around admission tests, your applications, how to make your personal statement stand out, or your interview technique. So if you've got any questions throughout this, just drop them into the live comments tab and they will come through on the stream. If we just go around and introduce ourselves to start with. So I'll start. I'm James. I'm a fourth year medical student at the University of Nottingham. I'm going into my final year now. So I'll pass on to Vicky next, if that's all right.
Hiya, I'm Vicky. I'm a third year medical student at the University of Leeds, and I'll be intercalating next year. So happy to answer any questions you have.
Hi guys, I'm Connor. I'm a fourth year medical student at King's College London, and I'm just finishing intercalating, also at King's.
Hey guys, my name's Meghna. I'm a fourth year medical student at the University of Liverpool. I'm also intercalating next year, so yeah, happy to answer your questions.
Hi everyone, I'm Tash. I'm a third year medical student at King's College London, and I'm also intercalating next year. I'm excited to see what you guys have to ask.
Great, so we've got a little overview there of the different medical schools we've got represented here. So we'll just wait for any of you guys to post any questions. In the meantime, we can talk through sort of your applications. So medical school applications are notoriously competitive, and you need to start thinking about how you're going to make your application competitive as soon as possible. So now is probably the perfect time while you've got this little gap from school or university. So if we could go around and start with some top tips from each of us. So does anyone want to contribute any top tips for our aspiring medical students?
Yeah, I can go first. So I think the biggest thing on everyone's mind applying to medical school is work experience. And obviously it's quite difficult to get hospital-based work experience normally, especially now. But I think Brighton and Sussex University are offering some online sort of work experience. So definitely look into that. And also, I don't think just because of the lockdown, you can't do anything to plan your current upcoming work experience. So for example, you could email around general practices and ask if they'd have you, shadow any one of their staff. So you could sit in on reception with a nurse. So yeah, there are lots of opportunities for work experience. I think sometimes you just have to sort of think outside the box.
Yeah, on that note, the Royal College of GPs also has a virtual work experience called Observe GP. So if you head over to the RCGP website, there's a link there for the Observe GP, which is going to be a great platform for getting some of that virtual GP work experience. And whether you do your work experience online in a virtual scenario or you're able to do it in person, maybe you've already done some, now is a perfect time to start thinking about writing your personal statements. And a key thing with the work experience is reflection. So if you have upcoming work experience or you're going to start doing the virtual work experience, try and keep a log so you can be reflective on things that you've done. And people want to hear about how it's made you feel, maybe what you've learned, rather than just a list of things that you've done each day. Try and pick out specific moments that meant something to you, maybe show that you've learned something new. And the real thing here is to show that you have an understanding of what it might be like to have a career in healthcare and to show a commitment to a career in healthcare. And so try and think about moments of your experiences, whether that's a particular interaction with a patient, a particular doctor who you had an amazing conversation with, or maybe if you just found it really difficult. Those are all great things that you can reflect on in your personal statement.
Perfect. So we'll come back to a few more top tips in a minute. We're starting to get some questions through from the YouTube and Facebook streams. So we've got our first one from Kyle, which is, do any of us know about gem medicine? Does anybody want to take that, or?
So right now, none of us are actually graduate entry medical students, but we do have someone on the team who is. So if you want to email us, we can put you in touch with them. And yeah, it's worth looking into kind of a bit more about grad medicine on their websites and emailing any admissions tutors. And as well, you can email us and we can help with what we can.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think on our last Q&A that we did on this, Gersh was here. Am I right in saying that? Yeah, Gersh is one of the team who is a GEM student, and I think she did gave some quite good advice on applying to GEM. So it might be worth for any potential GEM applicants to go and have a look at that. We got another question. Okay,
yeah, so we've got a question about what will be, or have we got any tips and tricks for how to conduct interviews? Interviews are having to be done online, and that's a great question. So if you haven't had interviews already, or if you enter through clearing, or you need to have some kind of chat with any of your medical schools and be socially distancing, so you're having to do that from home online, I think a key thing is just to prepare for it exactly the same way as if it was an in-person interview. So you need to be taking it seriously. You need to be fully dressed. Don't just put on a shirt and be in your underwear. Get ready for it just like it's a real interview. And so that'll be preparing some questions beforehand. Do your research about the specific university. So know what type of course the university teaches. Maybe know something about something the university is particularly known for, whether it's research, or maybe they do have a particularly impressive anatomy program. And also have some questions ready for the interview tutor who's going to be interviewing you. Universities love to see that you are interested in the university that you're going to. You're not just going to accept the first offer that comes your way. They want to know that you are interested in their medical school. And so have some questions ready, whether that's questions about societies, questions about career progression. Does anyone else want to chime in with that one on their interview preparation?
Yeah, well, I suppose it'd be interesting to see how the different styles of interview will be conducted online, because at the moment it's either panel or you get sort of station interviews as well. So those are the two ones that I had during my application process. So it might be worth sort of looking on what the medical schools say, how they're going to conduct these, because preparing for these different styles of interviews do differ slightly. So with something where there's loads of stations, where there'll be like an ethics station or maybe a role play kind of station, you might need to prepare for that differently than like a panel interview where you'll have people sort of asking you questions, about your personal statement and about what you like about the university, all in sort of one go rather than in like multiple different stations. So I'd say keep a lookout for advice on how specific medical schools are going to conduct those interviews. But exactly like what Connor said, in terms of just going about generally preparing for your interviews, that shouldn't really change based on whether it's online or not. So yeah.
Okay, so we've got another question here from Aisha on YouTube, which is about advice to people hoping to start med school this year, and what do you wish you'd known in your first year? Does anybody want to start on that one?
Yeah, I can go for it. So I think just take every single opportunity you get, even from first year. I think you go into starting medicine and you think, oh my word, it's going to be 5-6 years. It's such a long time. And now that I've reached the halfway stage, it has actually flown past. And it's quite scary thinking that in 3 years' time I'll be on the wards as a doctor. So yeah, just take every opportunity you can, whether that's when you're on placement, by speaking to doctors, whether there's anything extra you can do, such as joining some surgery, or sitting in an extra clinic, or even preclinical years, really getting involved with societies, and just doing things that you enjoy. Like, don't feel forced to do anything just for your CV, for example, but just getting stuck in with anything you can.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's all really good advice there. The things that I'd add would be that I know it varies by medical school, but certainly a lot of them, it's not as intense as you're thinking in the first couple of years. Medicine as a degree is quite contact heavy. So compared to some people on other courses that you'll be living with in halls, you'll have quite a lot of lectures and a lot of contact time. But you do still have time to pursue your own hobbies. Don't drop them completely, and they are a great sort of avenue for stress relief outside of medicine. They're really important to keep going with any hobbies or extracurriculars that you've got when you start medical school. That quite nicely leads us on to Sarah's question, which is about talking about your extracurriculars in a personal statement, especially how you link it back to doing medicine. So what I'd say about that is, I think everybody in a personal statement, when you apply to medical school, you've got to appreciate that everyone is going to have good academics, some sort of extracurricular. They're going to have done things like, D.V. or NCS or something. You need to be able to talk about exactly why that's important. So if you're talking about a sports team or something, talk about a time you've shown leadership, or you've looked after someone after they've had a particularly bad event. You need to reflect on why that's important and why that's a good why that's giving you skills for medicine. There's a good page on our website about reflecting on your extracurriculars and reflecting on your experience. So I'd definitely point you towards that. Does anybody else have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think, well, I certainly did this. I panicked that I wasn't grade 8 in any musical instrument. I wasn't on the A sports team or whatever. But I think, as James was saying, it's definitely what you've learned from it and what skills you've developed from doing that. So I wouldn't worry too much about what the extracurricular activity is, but try and make it seem like a bit of a bigger thing, and you learn lots from it that will help you to be a doctor.
Okay, and we've got another question here about examples of sort of things we learned during our work experience placement. So I think some of the things that it's really nice to mention at interview are that you didn't just shadow a doctor the full time you were on your work experience. You perhaps saw other members of the team in hospital, GP, whichever setting you do your work experience in, recognising the role of the nursing team or physios, perhaps carers if you do any work experience in a care home, for example. So you really need to reflect on that in your interviews. That's something that doesn't leave you after applications. Later on in your clinical years, you do really value the input of clinical pharmacists on the wards, checking that your prescribing's good, that they're full of knowledge on the wards as well. So really recognising the role of other healthcare professionals is something I learned on work experience.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me,
you go on, Megan. Okay, I was just going to say that, if you have the opportunity to sit in a clinic or anything, and then you find a particularly interesting case, it shows that, you've really taken initiative to go away and read up about it. And then, you can even talk about it in your personal statement, that you actually enjoyed the clinic and that you engaged with it and asked lots of questions. And you can use that in your personal statements and in interviews. So that's something that I did, and I got really good feedback from my interviewers there. Sorry, Connor.
I was going to say, in my one, I was lucky enough to have some hospital work experience as well as some GP. And in my fortnight in the hospital, I spent a lot of the time talking to the junior doctors rather than just shadowing the consultant that I'd emailed and managed to get some work experience with. I found it really useful to sit in the doctor's office and talk to the junior doctors as they were going around their duties, and then be able to reflect on how they said it was to be a young doctor in the NHS, because for the majority of our careers, and particularly for our time at medical school, that's more like the experience that you're going to be facing. And so while it's incredibly useful to shadow a GP and to talk about that you had experiences of what it might be like to be a GP or to be a consultant, showing that you also had an experience of being a more junior doctor or being a more junior person in the NHS is also really valuable.
Okay, so just before we move on to our next question, if there's any GEM applicants who are wanting a bit more information about GEM, you can drop us an email on the Becoming a Doctor website. There's contact details, and we'll put you in touch with one of the team members that study graduate entry medicine and have any tips around applications for that. So another question here on Facebook about study tips. Tips for boosting your personal statement and keeping calm during interview. So I think we've done a little bit on personal statement. Should we go for interview technique next? Anybody want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of staying calm for interviews, I'd say, practice makes perfect. So just try and go into the interview knowing that you've done some prep, because I personally, that made me feel quite calm about the situation. So just knowing things like keeping in touch with all the current news on any sort of medical issues. So at the time, I think there was a lot of junior doctor strikes during my application year. So just keeping in touch with all the current affairs and making sure also that you really sell yourself, because when you get into the interview and you're sort of stressed out, sometimes I found in my first interview that I didn't feel like I came out of the interview thinking I'd really told them about all the things that I'd done and why I'd be a great candidate for Cardiff, which was my first interview. And so I say, like, really go into the interview with highlighting some points about what you want to tell them, basically, like have examples of where you've shown leadership, have an answer, not like a sort of exact answer, but just sort of ideas of what, when they ask you things like why medicine, just have sort of ideas behind what you want to say, so that you don't get flustered in the sort of stress of the moment, because that just happens. So just have some pre-prepared ideas on questions that are probably going to come up, and practice them with your friends, with your family. Don't have like a script, but just practice being able to answer those questions and being able to really translate all the hard work that you've done at an interview stage.
Yeah, this may sound quite silly, but I would just try and enjoy it as much as possible, which obviously it's a very stressful environment. But remember, like, you have reached this stage of getting an interview, which means that you're doing so well. And the university really thinks that you could be, you would be suitable for them. So really sell yourself, and just be confident as much as possible. If you have to sort of fake it till you make it as such, just smile your way through and just be confident.
I'd say in terms of the MMI interviews, so King's is an MMI. I hugely recommend taking each station as its own interview. So do not stress if you feel like you messed up one station. They'll all be weighted differently, and messing up in one station has no impact on any of the other stations. And the markers don't talk to each other before they give you a mark. You just get an individual mark from each of the stations that you've gone through. And as long as you show your best self in all of them, you'll be fine. And so if you happen to say something wrong or get an answer wrong or forget something that you should have said in one of the stations, just move on to the next one. In an interview, in the panel interviews, it's a little bit harder to do that. But remember that you can take your time. And sometimes when you're asked a question, taking a few seconds to compose yourself and think of an answer, rather than just spewing something that you've memorized, that can come across even better. So don't be afraid to take a few seconds and think about something.
So our next question on the YouTube stream is whether we'd advise taking a gap year before going into med school. Did any of us take a gap year out of interest?
I took a year off. I applied for deferred entry, so part of my personal statement was what I was planning on doing on my gap year. I knew from probably when I was doing my GCSEs that I wanted a break between the 7 years of secondary school and then the 5 years of medical school, and that was always on the cards for me. So I would hugely recommend it for anyone who feels that they're able to. I was lucky enough to have planned it for a long time and kind of knew what I was doing. But for me, I think it definitely meant that when I came back to medical school, I'd missed education for that year, and I was really ready to learn again and to kind of be able to apply myself to something.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, I think it's quite a personal choice to decide to go to university anyway, and to decide medicine is, 5-6 years of commitment. So if you don't feel ready, then by all means take a gap year, do some extra work, earn some money, get some new hobbies, things that you will use for the rest of your life. So it can be good, it can be amazing. I did a gap year because I didn't get into medicine first time around. So I know a lot of people might be in that position too. But even then, you can make the most of it. You can get some more experience, work on your applications, and definitely it can be really helpful for you.
And our next question is onto admissions tests, so UCAT or BMAT advice. So I'll start. Nottingham's a UCAT university. I sat both. I think the other entry test that might be applicable to some of you is the GAMSAT, which I've heard from sort of my fellow GEM students is a particularly horrible admissions test. For the UK CAT, there's five different sections, possibly 6. I'll have to check that. But they all assess in a different 5. It is 5, excellent. They're all assessing a different part of your sort of skill set. I think my main advice would be to just sort of accept that you're not going to be scoring 100% in every section. It's everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. I think if you use the official UCAT resources to prepare, they've got some practice tests and things. You can work out which of the sections is your weakest and really focus your energy on that. So for me, it's the abstract reasoning section. I absolutely hated and had to do loads and loads of practice questions on that. It was 4 years ago and I can still remember it being awful. So I think if you use those official resources to start with, and then purchase perhaps books if you want further questions, would be my best advice. Just do question after question on your weakest area.
Yeah, just to add to that, the UCAT certainly didn't come naturally to me. Every part was really difficult for me, and my average score was not high at all, but that didn't mean that I wasn't successful with my applications. I was successful, so just UCAT isn't everything, and if you don't score a particularly high mark, just maybe look at universities that take other things into account as well, like personal statement, your previous academic grades. So just use your best things to your advantage, if that makes sense. Yeah,
there are tons of resources online that will help you to understand how different universities weigh each of the components of the application. So lots of universities use the UCAT as a cutoff, so you probably won't know what it is, but they'll set a minimum cutoff, and then when you're above that cutoff, they won't take your UCAT score into account anymore. Whereas other universities will say that the better your UCAT score is, the better you're doing in their application. So I think notoriously Newcastle weights the UCAT quite highly. So supposedly, if you do very well in the UCAT, then it's a good idea to apply for Newcastle. Whereas I know that Plymouth and Exeter had a cutoff, at least when I applied. So as long as you did above a threshold, then they would consider you. Yeah, so we've had quite a lot of questions about this. The BMAT is definitely going ahead as normal, as far as they've said. So the November sitting of the BMAT will happen as normal as the current guidance. And the UCAT, normally the normally the applications for sitting the UCAT open on the 4th of May. They delayed that, and as of the 11th of May, the guidance was that they plan on still going ahead, but testing will start later in the year than normal. So testing will start in July or late July, rather than the earlier time that it normally starts. And they haven't yet released when the dates for applying for the exams will open, but I'm sure that will come in the next few weeks.
So this is a question about resources for students requiring additional financial support or bursaries. So a lot of the bursary applications are specific to the university you apply to. So my best advice would be to look at each individual university and medical school, see any financial support or bursaries that they offer in particular, whether you meet the criteria for them. Unfortunately, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It is very specific to the individual medical schools and universities that you apply to. So I'd look at each individually there. Does anyone else have anything to add on that one, or no?
No, I think depending on if you're from the UK, then you'll be applying for the student finance company that applies to your country. So I'm from London. I applied for Student Finance England before I came to university, and they finance your first 4 years of medical school. And after that, you're able to apply for the NHS bursary, which then covers tuition fees for the following years. And you're able to still get a maintenance loan or a maintenance grant from them. The maintenance loan and maintenance grant from Student Finance England, at least, will be dependent on your household income. So if you're coming from A levels, that will be dependent on your parents' income. And then the same again, if you were not financially independent before starting university, your application for the finance from NHS England will also be based on your parents' income before you were studying.
Okay, so there's a question on Facebook about the benefits of intercalating. I think we've got quite a few intercalating students amongst us, so we're in good stead to answer this question. From a Nottingham perspective, particularly, it's sort of, you don't get the option to intercalate as an extra year. Everyone takes half of the third year to do a sort of research project leading to a BMed degree. I would say that's quite a good balance if you're not sure about whether you want to intercalate or not, whether you're interested in research or not. It's only a few months if you absolutely hate it. If you are very set on pursuing sort of academic medicine, it might be that you want to go to another university and do a full intercalated year. So I'll let some of the others that have done the full intercalated year talk about that.
So I'm just coming to the end of my intercalated year. So I've just intercalated in imaging sciences at King's College London. I've absolutely loved it. I decided to intercalate because I think academic medicine, and at least the idea of being involved in academics, was always quite a strong appeal for me. I'm leaning towards surgery, and unlike a lot of people who lean towards surgery, I decided to intercalate in imaging rather than anatomy. That was just a personal choice. I felt that might make me stand out a little bit. But also, if you do an anatomy course, you're able to do much more surgery specific. The imaging sciences course at King's is very based around, like one side of it is the physics of the different imaging modalities, and then the other side of it is kind of med tech. So that's also something that I find very interesting. Intercalating is a great way of boosting your application to foundation programs because you get an extra point for your degree and you get points for publication. And it's an excellent way of getting publications while in medical school because you have the time and you'll be interacting with a lot more academics and kind of PhD students and that sort of thing.
Yeah, just to add to that, I would say that it took me a long time to decide whether I wanted to intercalate or not next year. And part of my reasons why I wasn't so sure whether I did want to was because I was worried that I would forget all my clinical knowledge and turn up in 4th year being like, I don't know anything. So I've decided to do primary care next year at King's College London, as I think it's a good balance between I think 1 day a week we are in a GP practice, and then the rest of the week is spent doing more academic related things. So yeah, I think that's a good balance if you're similar to me and worried about losing all clinical skills. And as well, I'm quite interested in doing general practice in the future. Yeah, and I initially as well was a bit worried about adding another year to the 5 years, but as I mentioned earlier, 5 years will go quickly. My first 3 years have gone too quickly, so another year is great.
Yeah, and also I'd just like to add, oh, sorry. You can also intercalate in things that are unrelated to medicine. So I'm choosing to intercalate in law, and I've just find it really interesting. So, you know, you can take a year out to get some new skills, and that can benefit you in the future.
So a question from Facebook. Would you recommend applying for pharmacy and 4 medical schools as a backup? I think I know a lot of people use that 5th option to apply for a backup course, and I think that's a really sensible option. I mean, you can leave it, you know, you waste it otherwise. You can't use it for medicine. I don't know about pharmacy, and I'm not sure I'd recommend it as a backup, because I think it is, you know, it's a 4-year course. It's quite competitive and quite intense on its own. So I'm not sure I'd recommend that particularly as a backup option to medicine. I'm not sure what the other guys would think.
I think, yeah, like you said, it's really nice to have a 5th option because, like you said, applying to medicine is really competitive, and even with perfect grades, perfect everything, you know, there's still that chance you might not get a place, and that's not because you're not a smart student and you can't do medicine. So I would say I applied for biomedical sciences as my 5th option. And it was really nice to have that there, because I got the offer there before all my interviews for medicine. That made me feel quite confident that, yeah, you know, I'm a good applicant for university and for a science degree. But yeah, like you said, with specifically pharmacy, if you're really keen to do medicine, that is going to be quite a different angle of healthcare. So, like, you know, it is a commitment of 4 years. So it just depends whether you might want to take a gap year instead and reapply again, and then also apply with a 5th option there as well, so in case maybe in the gap year you don't get into medicine again. But yeah, if you want to commit to pharmacy as your 5th option, there's no harm in doing that, because it's nice to have that option there. But yeah, just think about exactly whether you want to commit to doing that for a few years and then maybe reapplying to medicine after that, or just maybe reapplying again during your gap year.
I'm happy to take this next question. We've got one from Facebook about how university exams compare to A-level or GCSE exams. So at King's, at least, the vast majority of our exams, which kind of count towards our grade, are multiple choice exams. So you probably had some multiple choice sections of your A-level science exams, but they take some getting used to. I'd say they're much more similar to like the UCAT questions than maybe to like an A-level question. Starting off in first year, you'll have exams that are more based on kind of knowledge recall. They'll be based on biochemistry, anatomy and physiology. And then as you progress through the years of university, things get more clinical and your knowledge needs to be more in depth. And so there'll be questions which have a lot more kind of implied knowledge. So rather than directly asking you a question, they might ask you a question which you need to do several steps in your mind. So you might need to make a diagnosis and then choose the most accurate treatment, or you might need to assess the situation and decide what the most viable option is here. In terms of how to revise, if you've been learning to revise for A-levels, I think a lot of that is transferable. So a lot of the skills you'll learn when studying your A-levels will be able to be transferred. For me, I took a gap year, and so there was a bit of a shock coming back into education, which I actually found quite useful. I didn't end up doing particularly well in my A-levels. And when I came to university, I kind of relearnt how to learn, and that was really valuable for me. And so I've kind of overhauled how I do everything. But they're similar to an extent. The pressure is the same. The timing is often the same. A lot of your skills will be transferable.
So we've got a question about work experience and what would be good work experience to have. For me, I applied, I had a sort of a stock letter that I decided to type out with, "Hi, I'm James, I'm interested in medicine. I'm looking for some work experience, could you help?" And I think I sent it to about 20 different places, got 2 or 3 responses. So honestly, my best advice would be to type out a letter, send it to anywhere you think is you would enjoy some work experience and that is a little bit relevant. I sent mine to local hospitals, local GP practices, although not your own. That's an important point for confidentiality, and local care homes. I think any sort of that experience is relevant. It does look good, and if you can reflect on it, like we talked about earlier, it's not just what you've done, it's what you've learned from it. As long as you can reflect on it and talk about it in interviews, then it's worth doing. So there's a question about getting more experience. Like I said, just type up that big sort of stock letter, send it out to as many places as you can. I think especially at the moment, there is a lot of awareness that you're not going to be able to get that in-person experience, particularly in hospitals and GP practices, because of the ongoing situation. So the online work experience through the Royal College of GPs that we mentioned earlier and Brighton and Sussex is a great resource to have. That's another question about more experience. Which universities place a lower weighting on UCAT? It is available for most universities. Their selection policies are available on their website. I know, like Connor said earlier, some universities are always traditionally more UCAT heavy, like Newcastle. Some are much less UCAT heavy. Some use it as one of the ways they assess you, as well as grades and personal statements. So I think really it's going through the selection policies of the medical schools that you're interested in, usually on their website.
Yeah, I think if that's something that people are interested in, we can definitely compile a list. I know there are lists available online. When I was applying, becoming a doctor wasn't a thing. I remember looking at the Medic portal, when I applied, they had a breakdown of the application requirements for every single UK medical school. And the student room also has forums, which will have it available as well. But becoming a doctor wasn't available when I was applying. So we're going to have resources available on our site as well. So if you head to becomingadoctor.org, we're going to have lists for all of the information that you could need.
Just add as well, if after you've looked around and you still are a bit unclear about things, try maybe emailing the admissions tutors, and they can be really helpful during your application process too.
Yeah, so I mean, just commenting on this comment. So there are a number of different things that you get points for when you make your application for your foundation year. And basically that application is determining where you will end up as an F1, as obviously certain areas are more competitive. I know that London areas are more competitive, for example. But don't let this be the only reason why you do it, I would say, because it's actually not that many points, and it's a year of your life, and obviously it's money, and there's no point doing it if you're not going to enjoy it and not get a good mark at the end of it. So don't let the points be the only reason why you do it.
So a question about pursuing a BLS course in preparation of your application. Honestly, I think anything like that is good experience, particularly if you learn it well enough to be able to go on and during medical school, a lot of universities have societies that then go and teach those skills to local schools and things. So if that's something you're interested in, it's only a good thing to do. I don't think it will tick boxes on your application score, but if you can reflect on it, it's a great thing to talk about at interview. And certainly in your first couple of years, it's a common OSCE station. OSCEs are your clinical exams when you start medical school. So being competent at BLS is quite a common early years OSCE station. So it can't do any damage to do a BLS course. So a question about applying to QUB and UCAT scores. So if you have a low UCAT score, I'm not sure about QUB especially. I'm not sure if anybody else on the panel does.
No. I wouldn't say about them specifically, but I think you've got a few months before your UCAT exams. And you're going to be sitting your UCAT exams before applying. So right now, don't let that deter you from applying to QB, but once you've sat your UCAT and you have your UCAT grade, have a look again. If you decide that maybe it's lower than you wanted, and you know if you know that Belfast scores you on your UCAT, then you might decide that you're going to apply to somewhere else. But 9 A stars at GCSE is fantastic, and so well done for that. I'm sure that will count towards your application.
Or you could try looking at BMAT unis as well if you're not finding that UCAT suits you. I did both as well just to open up some options. I was quite average at both of them, to be honest. So yeah, I wasn't particularly brilliant at any of them, but I still managed to target my application to universities which awaited the UCAT a bit more generously than, let's say, unis that really make a cutthroat score that they don't look at the rest of your application. So I remember Cardiff was actually quite a nice university. If you have good GCSEs and let's say an average UCAT score, you'll definitely get an interview there. That was the situation for me. But then yeah, so just consider BMAT as well.
So finally, we've got a quick question about advice to people hoping to start medical school this year. What do you wish you'd known in your first year? I think we've answered that one. If anybody's got anything more to add.
I would say that there is a possibility right now that at least at some universities, your first term might be largely online. I think if you've accepted an offer at university, and you're expecting to start somewhere in September, keep an eye on that university's kind of official channels on their website, and keep an eye on their Twitter as well, and keep an eye on the news too, because some universities have already said that their first term for non-medical subjects will be taught online, and just be prepared for that. Don't let that take you by surprise.
So a question on YouTube about most important things to write in your personal statement and any good resources for writing it. So in your personal statement, it's got to have some sort of overlying structure. I wouldn't make it too prescriptive. You've got to have this, this, and this in it. It's got to flow nicely. Otherwise, assessors are going to make it interesting to read for them. They have to read hundreds and hundreds each year to make yours interesting to read. I think the most important thing I'd say is not just to bullet point things you've done, so work experience, roles that you have, sports that you play. If you can't talk about what you've learned from each of them, then they're probably not worth putting in. reflecting back on all your experiences is so important for the personal statement and the interview.
Definitely, you've only got a certain amount of characters that you can use, and you have to try and sell yourself in the best way possible. So make sure everything you write has a purpose for being on the page.
And not everything has to be sort of work experience related. So definitely, I think we mentioned previously, like looking at things like extracurriculars. I remember things like being on the swim team. I talked a lot about how that, you know, made me a good team player, and, you know, showed leadership skills. So yeah, doesn't just have to be specifically medicine related. You can just reflect on extracurricular things that make you sort of interesting and unique as well, and apply that to medicine.
Okay, so finally, we're going to wrap this Q&A up here. We're continuing over on Instagram Live. The Instagram handle is coming up across the bottom of the screen in a moment. We are also planning a virtual conference for aspiring medical students and healthcare professionals this year. The mailing list for that is on our website, and the link is on screen now. Normally this would be in person, but obviously this year it's going to be virtual, and it's going to be a really great event, giving you lots of tips and tricks for your applications initially and what careers are like in healthcare. So make sure you sign up on the Becoming a Doctor website. So this is continuing over on Instagram. Thanks for joining us for this Q&A, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We can only have 2 of us on the screen at a time on the Instagram, and so Tash has already headed over there. She's hosting us. At least one of us will be there too, and those of us will also be on the comments. So keep your questions coming, just on the Instagram.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye,
Good luck.
guys.